This is Business Tonight. Nigeria's central bank moves to consolidate forex gains to monitor use of naira-denominated cards for international transactions. Potential problems for Nigeria's beef consumption as country eating more than it is breeding. Moody's leaves South African economy rates unchanged in investment grade. And China dismisses trade war with United States as US dollar falls further. We have details in a moment. I am Yemisi Lanredo. With Nigerian banks adjusting spending limits for their customers, a new directive from the Nigerian Central Bank might be worth taking a closer look at. The CBN says it is closely monitoring the use of naira-denominated cards for international transactions by bank customers. And according to the bank, the monitoring will ensure its gains recorded in the forex were not lost. This announcement is instructive as some banks have restricted monthly spending on naira cards to only high net worth customers. And last year, most Nigerian banks suspended forex transactions on their naira debit and credit cards. Now, despite increase in pressure by food inflation, headline rate is forecast to drop by 5 points to sub 16% for the month of July. Asset management company FSDH Merchant Bank is projecting a 5-month consecutive decline in the inflation rate year on year. It is, however, warning that general price movement in the consumer goods and services would increase composite consumer price index. Now, the decline in the headline inflation for last month is predicated on the boost in categories of non-food items. All right, let's look at why the headline inflation keeps declining, but the food inflation has so much pressure on it. And joining me to do that is the head researcher, Ayo Akiwomi, with FSDH Merchant Bank. Many thanks for your time, Ayo. This evening, yes, you predicted last month that there was going to be a further decline in headline inflation. Of course, we got that. And already another prediction. Tell us why. Why do you think we have that decline in headline inflation, but that pressure on food inflation?
Thank you very much, Yemisi, for having me tonight. We expect that the inflation number for the month of July will drop marginally to 15.96 from 16.1 that the National Bureau of Statistics released for the month of June. And this is on account of the moderating impact of food prices and some other non-food items that make up the consumer price index. And again, like you mentioned last month when we spoke on this program, we noted also the fact that the base effect is still putting some downward pressure on the inflation numbers that we're having today. The rate of increase last year between June and July is expected that it's going to be higher than the rate of increase between June and July this year, and therefore the headline inflation will drop if that happens.
All right, I'm very sure this is not what Nigerians really want, because they actually want that food prices in the market going down. So how soon do we expect that prices will be going down in the market, because prices are still skyrocketing?
I think it's still going up generally, but then at a decelerating rate. If you look at the price of yam, the price of yam is going down in the market. Tomato is going down in the market. Yes, seasonality effect, onions is still going up. As we go into the harvest season, which we are beginning to enter, the price will begin to moderate. However, everything still depends on what happens at the international level. We've seen FX rates increase supply. If there is a shock, and just like what the IMF mentioned in their last visit to Nigeria in the month of July, that Nigerian is still highly vulnerable to external shock. And again, if that happens, and we have, for instance, if there is an increase in electricity tariff, or there is an increase in PMS, premium motor spirit, the inflation number will reverse, and therefore we begin to see upward trend again. But we don't see that happening in the short to medium term, so we expect that it will continue to
Of course,
drop.
there's been so much focus on the intervention with the Naira. We see that from the CBN on a weekly basis. And of course, Nigerians are still afraid that, okay, with this export, for example, you talked about yam, export of these food products out of the country, there is going to be an increase with the food product that is being consumed in the country. So how do you think the government can actually handle that part?
I mean, for me, if there is increased supply, production, and we don't have any natural disaster, there is no flooding that can affect agricultural produce, and we have good harvest, it will, in part, the food prices will go down. Yes, what we are seeing in the foreign exchange market, the dollar at over 300 naira is an incentive for Nigeria to export, because as you are exporting at that rate, you are bringing foreign exchange into the country, and the government is encouraging, farmers to do that and exporters to do that. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the central bank came up with this export-import window for the foreign exchange, to encourage people who are exporting to bring in foreign exchange, earnings to Nigeria, which of course is good for the country. But again, if there is increase in production, like I mentioned earlier, we see harvest, there is no problem with, causing production shortage in the country. It's going to be win-win for
cost of production
for everybody. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So with this, do you think with this further decline that we have almost every month in the headline inflation, do you think Nigeria is nearing that exit of recession anytime soon?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers that is coming out from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, the Central Bank of Nigeria, we in FXTH research, we expect that by third quarter of this year, when the Q3 numbers from GDP will be released, we expect Nigeria should exit recession. But mind you, even if we have zero growth, that is end of recession, because that means we are not going to have contraction. But then, on a good note, we begin to see confidence, business confidence improving, consumer confidence improving. We begin to see purchaser managers index improving, and these are leading indicators. Stock market is, all year high. We begin to see also foreign investors bringing money to Nigeria. Businesses are expanding, and with time, we expect that there will be gains from this, and therefore we exit recession. All
right, we'll leave it on that high note. Many thanks for your time, Ayo Akiyomi, Head Researcher, FSDH Merchant Bank. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, the Made in Nigeria campaign is fast gaining momentum. We'll tell you about the market getting that attention. This is Business Tonight. You're watching Business Tonight. Nigeria has huge demand for beef, which does not match with domestic production. Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Audu Ogbe, says the country is consuming more cows per day than it was breeding, and warned it may not be long before the country runs out of beef supply. Agriculturist Wale Oyikoya speaks on this latest.
We consume more than what we are producing. And America used to say, where's the beef? If you see most of the average Nigerians today, when they're eating, most of them doesn't really have a balanced diet of some of this meat. And you have to agree with me that meat consumption is one of the easiest protein that we can ever consume in this region. But it's very scarce and it's very expensive in the market right now.
All right, remember when government promised to revamp the Made in Nigeria concept, it might just be working out in Nigeria's commercial hub of Aba. Well, despite the production capacity of more than 40,000 pairs of shoes a week, hubs like Aba's Shoe Plaza are still largely underrated, which means the Nigerian government has its work cut out for it, especially to refocus SME growth. Now, for hubs like Aba, the path to growth might just be the right equipment that guarantees output that meets international standards. Well, let's discuss this further. And Business Director, TBWA Concept Unit, or CIBO, Imoitsike, joins me to share his thoughts in the studio. Many thanks for your time.
Very nice meeting.
Also joining me is George Onuku, the Group Head of TBWA Concept Unit. He's also here in the studio. Many thanks, George.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me begin with you, George. What inspired this campaign, Made in Aba?
Well, for us, the narration had been going on for quite a long time in the country. And as a business advertising agency, we felt the need to start bringing up the narrative even more to Nigerians. And so, I mean, we looked around the country and immediately it struck to us about Aba being one of the treasures that we can highlight and drive the story about Made in Nigeria going forward.
All right, let me come to you now. What's the market value? You are the business director for this campaign. What's the market value of Aba industry?
I think the figures are quite extensive, and we've, from our own, visits to the place and sort of like opportunities that we've seen there, it's something that, it's been quoted in billions of dollars. I don't have the specifics, but most importantly for us, and as George has mentioned, what was critical for us was to begin to tell the story of Aba and the potential that's there. Because, I mean, as you said in your intro, the focus on the Made in Nigeria concept was something that government, paid particular attention to, and Aba is probably the jewel in that crown of Made in Nigeria.
What's been the reception so far? It's
been fantastic. The sort of engagement that we've had from, all quarters, social media, a lot of support from donor agencies. I mean, this campaign started as a concept from TBWA, but then we got a lot of support from the Ford Foundation, who were very interested in scaling up, and also linking us up with the state government, who were also looking to tell their story a bit better.
Yes, the government is so upfront about the Made in Nigeria, and if we're going to be looking at Made in Aba, there's been this negative outlook about Aba. How have you been able to handle that part?
What we did was essentially we shot 3 different commercials, 3 different documentaries about telling us the story about Made in Aba. The whole idea was for us to be able to see Aba for what it is, and not necessarily the negative vibes and information that we've been hearing about Aba. We all grew up with the whole ideology that Made in Aba is associated with fake products and inferior goods. But what this documentary sort of achieves, and we hope it will achieve even more, is to be able to change that perception about Made in Aba and let Nigerians start thinking about Aba as a business destination and as an opportunity for young people who are interested in whatever it is, fabrication, enterprise, fashion, designing, to start thinking about it as a special place to do business. All
right. Are you looking at any other market? We know Made in Aba is a commercial hub. Of course, there are other markets in Nigeria. Are you planning on moving into those other markets?
Definitely. I mean, a lot of what we need is obviously to have a lot of support because, as a private entity, there's a limit to how much we can support this sort of initiatives. So we do put our professional skills to use, which has led to the campaign that you've seen. But we need, partners to then work with us, both from the donor, like I said, industry, but also the state governments. We're looking at markets like Inewi. We're looking at things that are happening up north, in terms of, Kano, Kaduna, and Sokoto. So these are things we're exploring. But at this stage, we want to ensure that the Aba message in itself, is a true success. And so far, it's been positive.
All right. Any reception or any support from the government? Because, of course, they are at the forefront of this whole Made in Nigeria initiative we're talking about. But so far...
Absolutely. I mean, we do have to give credit to the Abia State government for the support that they've given to the campaign. Obviously, one of the things there's a lot of talk of public-private partnerships, and this is a good example of that because, while, they have bought into this campaign, they owned it as well, in terms of, pushing the message. The governor in particular has been a huge supporter, and, we do acknowledge the fact that they've been very supportive. And we're also there's further opportunities to engage. I know that we've still in talks with them about how they can support the campaign even further. Okay,
so do you think this campaign will actually take Nigeria out of that dependency on the oil that we've been for a while?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to start thinking within, and this campaign actually highlights our potential. It highlights what we can do as a country. And if we just pull our resources together and start asking ourselves these critical questions, what can we do, what do we have to offer, then I think gradually that would continue to build up and change the face, for better, basically.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Osibo and George, many thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us
very much tonight. Right. We appreciate it. Cheers. Ratings agency Moody's has left the rating level of the South African economy unchanged in investment grade. Well, what this means is that credit profiles of key institutions in the economy are still in good shape. South Africa's economy was downgraded to junk status in the first quarter of this year after former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was suddenly removed from office. The largest South African economy has been tainted by political crises rising from opposition parties' demand for the impeachment of President Jacob Zuma. All right, let's see what the global market is looking like today in Africa. And we'll begin, of course, with South Africa, where we stopped. It closed positively on the back of renewed interest by investors who have been encouraged by Moody's rating at the economy at the investment level. The market in Nairobi, Kenya, closed in green, and the political tension caused by last week's national election seemed to have dropped. In London, the FTSE 100 closed in a positive territory. Various blue-chip firms are reporting impressive earnings. Now, the CAC 40 in France traded upward, boosted by prospects of higher profits, especially from the manufacturing sector. In the U.S., the Dow Jones and other markets reacted sharply to Senate election defeat of ex-president of Argentina, Cristina Fernández Kirchner. Now, the Nasdaq jumped above 1% performance in late transactions as big firms floated huge stocks. But the U.S. dollar continues to fall even as China dismisses trade war. But what's the reason for the bubble? That's still to come on Business Tonight. All right, is the trade war being between U.S. and China? Well, that's the much we're getting for now with the U.S. economy, as Donald Trump is planning to actually give sanctions to China. All right, but China is warning against what it says might be a looming trade war being fueled by American plan to get at North Korea.
The fear on North Korea actually subsided a little bit over the weekend, so that is also helping the rebound. But I don't think people will be too aggressive because this North Korea tension actually would be in the market for some time. So North Korea had been the trigger for profit taking. So we are seeing a snowballing effect during the decline. And then the investigation into Weibo, Baidu, and Tencent actually triggered fear into those internet giant businesses in China. But we had seen stabilization in Baidu and Weibo in the U.S. trading.
Well, President Donald Trump's top trade advisor will determine whether to investigate Chinese trade practices that force U.S. firms operating in China to turn over intellectual property. Well, the move, which could eventually lead to steep tariffs on Chinese goods. But for Asian stocks, it bounced back on Monday after 3 losing sessions, tracking the firmer Wall Street, while the dollar was weighed down by tensions on the Korean peninsula and weak U.S. inflation data. Japan's Nikkei backed the trend and fell 1% as a strong yen overshadowed much better than expected second quarter economic growth.
The fear on North Korea actually subsided a little bit over the weekend, so that is also helping the rebound. But I don't think people will be too aggressive because this North Korea tension actually would be in the market for some time. So North Korea had been the trigger for profit taking. So we are seeing a snowballing effect during the decline. And then the investigation into Weibo, Baidu, and Tencent actually triggered fear into those internet giant businesses in China. But we had seen stabilization in Baidu and Weibo in the U.S. trading on last Friday, so that is helping sentiment here. And the upcoming results on Tencent actually had a very bullish expectation, so that is also helping the market.
Well, despite Donald Trump's chest beating on the growth of the U.S. economy since he took over, one fact left unsaid is that the U.S. dollar has kept falling. This year alone, it has fallen steadily at about 10% since January. It pushed lower on Friday, even as demand for other safe haven assets, typically a category that includes the U.S. dollar, rose amid the war songs between the U.S. and North Korea. The dollar, which surged in 2014 as the U.S. economy gained strength, is hardly in danger territory. The index is running just a bit lower than it was a year ago, but key U.S. economic data was weak last year, or was weaker last year. So what's behind this year's decline? And joining me to do that or talk more about that is Chinese-American journalist based in California, Amy Wu. Amy joins me on phone. Many thanks for your time, Amy. Yes, the U.S. dollar, long a symbol of American economic might, has fallen steadily this year. Why is the U.S. dollar falling?
Well, I think as you had stated, Yamasi, global stocks did take a tumble as the crisis with U.S. and North Korea started. Actually, one of the worst stock weeks since Donald Trump won the U.S. presidency. So anytime there's a risk of the crisis, for the dollar, I mean, it is a risk of the crisis for the dollar, but there's also an impending inflation report, I think, from the U.S. Federal Reserve. So I guess the other aspect of this is that, if the dollar weakens, then the demand for gold and other safe havens might continue to rise. And this is typical in times of uncertainty, which the U.S. and North Korean crisis is certainly, an example of a time of uncertainty.
Yes, fortunately or unfortunately for the dollar, things are looking up in Europe. Do you think investors are reacting to the political turmoil in America?
Yes, I think to a certain extent they certainly are reacting to the crisis. And the crisis that I'm referring to today, obviously on the plate, is the increasingly uncertainty about tensions between North and U.S. and North Korea in terms of even any kind of potential war, which we'd hoped that this absolutely does not happen. But anytime there's a crisis, there is a reaction from investors, and therefore we'll see a lot of investors look into other areas like gold and safe havens and things.
All right. So very, very briefly, Amy, do you think that the dollar will continue to fall with what's happening between the U.S. and North Korea? Very briefly.
Very briefly, I think that there is real potential that it would continue to fall if this crisis continues as such.
All right, Amy Wu, I must thank you so much for your time on Business Tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Just before we go, crude oil prices dipped as International Energy Agency doubts OPEC's ability to successfully curtail output. A barrel of the European Brent drops to $51 a barrel, with 45 cents coming down. And for the OPEC basket, a barrel of the crude sells for $49. The oil market is seen to be slippery at the time that the U.S. pumps shale type of crude to the market. And that's Business Tonight. Many thanks for watching. I am Yemisi Lanredo. Sports Center starts right now.